Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Tell the Damn Story with Chris Ryan. Kind of a hybrid guy, does some independent, does some traditional writing, publishing, editing, you know, whatever. Keep myself busy off the streets. Not like that guy, the one, the only, the Alex Simmons, who has written legends about the legends. He has advanced the careers of Scooby-Dooby and Archie and Batmania and so many others. He's contributed to the DC universe with the legendary much missed Orpheus, and of course has created his own American hero that is wonderful for all of us. His name is Aaron Blackjack Day. That's him, Alex Simmons. How are you, Alex?
I am fine. Boy, I feel even better. Thank you for that remarkable introduction. And
That's
I got to work out a list for you, guy, because folks, he undersells himself. I guarantee he undersells himself. So we're going to talk about you some point, fella.
Well,
but thank you
I
for
think
that.
there has been progress. Think about episode 1 or 2 where I was like, I'm just a piece of trash in the gutter. I have no idea why I am here. And now in episode 407, I'm like, I do this kind of stuff. So that's a huge.
It only took 390 some odd episodes to get to that.
So there we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
And
but
we
here
have an
we are.
interesting conversation for you today.
Yes, we do.
At least that's what I hear. Let's go to Alex for more details.
Okay. So, as jolly and as ridiculous and as amusing as we can be, I was telling Chris in the green room that one of the things I'm encountering with some of my private clients, but also a number of my students over the years and even more so recently, is the questions about does this make any sense to pursue writing? Am I any good at it? Or how do I work through this and how do I work through that? Can I really make any kind of money at it and blah, blah. There's all of these questions about, or I should say, all these questions coming from people who somewhere in their soul, in their hearts, in their mind, want to create, want to write, want to tell stories, but are trying to measure the validity of that against the backdrop of the rest of the universe, getting a regular job, going to school and blah, 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 blah. And so I thought, Chris and I, let us talk about what that pursuit has been like for us. Now, we've mentioned this on several episodes from time to time. You get a little this, a little that. But I thought we would be even more candid this time around and talk about what it's really been like to pursue our particular passions. And is it even more than a passion? But let's just start. And by the way, stick around to the end because I have no idea what we're going to say between now and then, other than knowing the stories that we've experienced. But I have a feeling that you'll come out of this with a clearer picture about what fuels people like us and yourselves.
Mutants. We're talking about mutants.
That's right. Watching me meld through
There's something wrong with us. Something very, very wrong with us.
In the jeans. Jordache.
I'm wearing jeans. Okay, yes. So how do you want to start this, bro?
Well, I think it's always fun because we go back and forth. It's like a ping pong match here. So I just spoke. So why don't you start? I remember a story that you used to tell about yourself as a kid and having the desire to write and draw stories and coming up against a wall, and not the usual wall that folks might think that we're talking about, where some friends of yours, some schoolmates are making fun of you, but an even harsher wall. Yeah, an even harsher wall.
Are you talking about my mom?
Well, family, yeah.
Yeah, it was an Irish family. My mom was part Spanish, but not the part that goes, "Oh, my king, my young king, you can do anything." Not that guy. Not that wasn't that kind of Spanish.
No, it wasn't that support.
She was like Irish Spanish. What the hell are you doing? That's ridiculous. That kind of. So you would get a lot of rolling of the eyes. I will paint it for a while, and I make these big paintings. I made a painting one time of a wizard, and I didn't have canvas. We weren't really,
You weren't
the
flush.
canvas buying type
Yeah.
of family. But my father had just replaced the window shades. And in the living room, there was like I don't know, it was wider than me. So it was probably about 4, maybe 5 feet wide, 6 feet long. It was so big, I didn't have floor space in our apartment to stretch it all out. So I would have to paint it. I drew it and then rolled up some and then drew some more and then rolled up. And then I would do the same with painting it. So I drew this big, it was like a bust of a wizard. And then the arms went out to either side. And of course, bolts came out because 14 bolts have to come out of the wizard's arms, right? And I was in some half-ass band, maybe I was 15. We never got out of the basement, but the guy wanted to call it Wizard, the guy whose basement it was. So that's why I painted a wizard. I thought it would be, we'd put it behind the drummer. Yeah, blah. So I was excited when it was all done. And I said, you guys, they kept asking, what the hell are you doing in there? Oh, I'm painting. I'm making a painting. What are you doing? What are you doing? So my mother was, she was always, I don't know, as if I was up to something.
Yeah.
And I said, well, it's finished. I'll show you. And I brought it out all rolled up, so it was in my hand like this. And then I went like this. You could only see my afro over it. And I slowly rolled it down. And then my father was like, huh, a wizard. Look at that guy. He's pretty powerful. Because he would do generic compliments or observations like that. And then I looked it down to see how their faces were. And, I think he had a Lucky Strikes in his. Hmm. And I happened to look at my mother. She was like, there was an empathy problem with her.
She wasn't feeling it.
If it wasn't about her, it couldn't be good. I'm not sure that sounds familiar. A little deja vu there. But that kind of stuff will stab you in the heart when you're not ready. So one of the lessons I took from that was, all right, don't show your art to people who aren't gonna be interested. Ever a long time, I showed nothing to nobody.
Mm.
I wrote a poem one time. I was so excited. We had just lost a friend of ours. He had hung himself, and I was trying to find ways to come across, what could I say, and I wrote one of my first poems ever. Poem. I grew up around music, so a lot of the poems sounded like lyrics, but I was
Hmm.
just learning, right? So, in my naivete, I ran to the friends I was hanging out with. Say, hey, finally it came out. I wrote something about, and I read it, and someone goes, "That line sounds like a Pink Floyd song. What the hell? You're just ripping people up." Nothing, nothing. They didn't give a fuck about the guy who died or the poem. So I was like, all right, never show them that. When we were even younger, we were just getting into music, and everybody was like, it would be cool to be in a band, wouldn't it? And I, of course, always my imagination goes flying ahead. So I drew a whole band, and it was ridiculous. One guy was dressed like the Scarecrow from Marvel Comics. Another guy, it was just a wacky shit. And next time they were over to listen to music, I was like, yeah, check that out. And one guy was like, who says we're gonna get dressed up like that? I was like, wow, I didn't know we were having a band meeting.
Wow.
So from all these things, I learned that you have to know who you're sharing things with, who your beta reader or
Just who you share your material with.
who
Yeah.
you let in that circle, right?
Yeah.
And then I met Glorious
He
years
wasn't
later.
15 at that point. He was
No,
older.
I was ancient. I was
Yeah.
20, 23, 24 when I met her. Um, and after a while, I started showing her stuff. And now she's the first person who sees anything. And she doesn't have to edit. She does a little bit because if she finds a typo, she'll help me out. And she doesn't have to give me editorial comment. It's just to have one other voice say, yeah, it's good that this exists.
Mm.
She doesn't use that phrase. It's just the tone of her voice. It's the look in her eyes. She'll bring out a point that she likes and all that sort of stuff. She knows that for a long time I've been struggling to find a way to express concerns I have about
Hmm.
current events. And I was doing Bob and Grace cartoons in my newsletter and that kind of stuff. They're two
Hmm.
old people, and the Bob is kind of an innocent, and oh, did you see this? And Grace is not. Grace is really sarcastic. So, but she looks like a sweet old lady, so it comes across as whoa. And then I got a drawing made of the White House with the demolition of the West Wing or East Wing,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
And I used that as from the office of the White House press secretary. And then I came up with a name. Forget the character's name at the moment, but it was assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the press secretary. So she was way down,
Yep.
and she would just get progressively harried in these press conferences trying to uphold some kind of sense of reality in a progressively crazier situation. And but those were good, but they both, I started finding it was harder to make jokes as things became more dire. So for a long time, I would just pitch glorious different ideas and come out and on Substack now you can find I have a newsletter called Soul Screaming, but I do these short pieces on it so far on a daily basis called The Blessings of Our Current President. And I use a very positive tone and I point to one word or one phrase that we have the blessing to consider word choice, spending, any of these things, right? And then I find myself able to, the comedic need or the that kind of need is channeled through very straight-faced John Cleese
Hmm.
almost seriousness and pleasantness, but underlying is a bit of jest or sarcasm or irony. And the whole idea, the whole point of it is to hopefully get some people to think about the things that we as Americans are going to have to carry. And we'll see if that goes anywhere. But it's the same thing, from the when I was a kid to now. You're always looking for, is this going to communicate? And who can you get that first, yeah, this should exist
Hmm.
from? And God bless Be's a glorious Joe Schmo, Gina the
Whomever.
Warrior,
Yeah.
Princess, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. She's kind enough to give it a first look and be encouraging.
I
Uh,
think I was just gonna, for those of you who got caught up in that story, underline this, that one of the things that creatives, and then again we're talking a lot about writers here, but one of the things that we deal with is that sense of, should I even bother? Is anybody really going to care? Is anybody really going to notice? And then we get into, as we move forward along that perilous journey, we start getting into, how much should I reveal? How much should I let folks know what I'm thinking, or that sort of thing? And how much should I expose? And even if you're not writing about yourself, you're doing the writing. So some aspect of who you are and how you think and how you see the world is coming out.
right.
And then you put it in front of people, in your case, friends, band members, family members, and you're vulnerable. You're
Yeah.
vulnerable at that
Yeah.
time. Because we want, the yardstick can be long or short, but the yardstick, right? The ruler can be long or short, but we want some sort of acceptance. We want people to
Right.
like us or what we do or something like that. And how much of that we need, again, depends on the personality. But yeah, you put it out
Right.
there, and you sort of wait to find out what's going to happen. And a lot
Yeah.
of
And
times, what happens, what's said to you, can change your trajectory
right. So
tremendously.
my point with all this was be careful. Just don't share it Everyone. I mean, okay, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. The Bronx was hard on everybody, but it was also the birthplace of a ton of really creative people.
Hmm.
So, this is part of the pressure and grinding that creates diamonds out of coal, right? There are so many that came out of here from all walks of life.
Yeah.
I'm not unique.
Y-
So that's my first lesson is choose wisely who you share it with, especially early on.
Okay.
And if you find somebody who is willing to go on the journey with you, understand the blessing that you have received.
Amen.
So what would be the next point? You
Well,
take the next
I,
one.
I get to share. For me, my creativity was a constant companion because I was an only child. I know you had
Mhm.
brothers and sisters, but
72 of them. Yeah.
yeah, I was it. And mom went, "Oh, never again." Mm-mm. So there I was solo. And for those of you who listened to other episodes of the show, you know that I was raised by a single mom, remarkable, loving, encouraging, supportive individual who has also had a number of major health issues. So life was very up and down and very tenuous. And so I had my imagination consistently, constantly. It was always with me. And sometimes I would either with action figures make up all kinds of stories, or I also loved drawing. So
Yeah.
I was kind of, you're talking about painting your wizards. My mother and sometimes my grandmother would give me, drawing pads, and you get your crayons and your pencils out, and you're creating whole universes.
Oh
And
yeah.
of course, you're influenced by the cartoons and comics that you're reading, so you're trying to do your versions of this and Mighty Mouse and all this sort of thing. And I remember that because of how we were living, which was, very constrained and very limited and limiting. When I read a comic book, and I've read comics more than I did books initially. When I read a comic book, I was there. I was rolling with these superheroes along the streets of Gotham, or flying the skies of Metropolis, or getting into a spaceship with Tommy Tomorrow. Yes, there was a character called that. And going out into intergalactic adventures, before even lasers were, were produced. There I am out there with ray guns and all. I was there. And it was particularly funny to me in hindsight that yeah, I knew I was black. I knew we had little or nothing in terms of money and space and luxury and all that. But in my head, all this was like all that just took a back seat because the world was out there and all kinds of
Yeah.
possibilities were out there. And so I wanted to create my own stories. And by drawing them or writing them, that was my escape. That was my release into a place where I had some sort of power, some sort of control. And even more importantly, again, hindsight, I had possibilities, infinite possibilities. From the Wild West to outer space, anything was possible. And I think, I got from some of my friends as well as people who just knew me and weren't that thrilled about it, you get digs. You get, man, that's why are you reading those comic books, or why are you doing this, or why are you doing that, or why aren't you more like what we're into? I could sink a basket periodically, but I was not good at basketball. I was, as my teen years, I was not a ladies' man. I knew a lot of great looking girls, but that's because they all considered me their friend. You know, so
Friend
so
zone Simmons.
right, cry on my shoulder and go back to the jerk. So to me, in that time period, I was writing stories or coming up with ideas for stories about guys like me who did something heroic and then got the girl. So once again, my imagination was my savior.
Yeah.
And in a way, there's a part of you that hears the noise that says, you gotta get serious now. You gotta get real. You gotta think about a real job. You gotta think about this. You gotta get a corporate kind of situation. You gotta think about the money. You hear all that and you question whether or not any of this, am I crazy? Am I really nuts? And then at 18, my mom's went into a hospital. We almost lost her. And then she got out in time for my graduation from high school. And then that that winter, just before Christmas, she went into a nursing home because of her health.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I was on my own, 100% on my own. And there were nights when, because I still had the apartment we were living in, and I was barely trying to keep on top of the bills. I had some, temp jobs and things like that, but that wasn't working out well. And I was feeling pretty low. I was feeling pretty bad. And I was thinking about, what can I do, or is it all going to go down the toilet? And, there were opportunities to do some nefarious things, to make some quick money. And I wrestled with those thoughts for a while. And once again, the mind, the writing, the influences, the reading, the stories, other people's stories. A good friend of mine who's was like, I guess, somewhere between an uncle, a Dutch uncle, and a big brother, Billy Graham, who was a comic artist and an illustrator and an actor in his own right, sort of took me under his wing. And sometimes when things got really bad, I would go hang out with him and watch him draw, and he would tell stories, and we'd go meet these interesting people in fascinating parts of the city that I had never been in. And they were all urban, it wasn't again luxury. It was all very down to earth urban. But again, all kinds of possibilities opening up just in a different level of the world. More stories, more visions of possibilities, more clear yearnings in me to do something with this love of stories, with this desire to tell stories, with this desire to act, to follow the arts. Because no matter what else was happening to me, no matter how bad things got, that still remained my escape. That still remained my savior. That still remained my salve, my release, and my way of recording some of my thoughts and feelings so that I could take a breath and then maybe make a better choice as I move forward. And I was moving forward very cautiously because, again, I was 18 and on my own, and there were a lot of possibilities, good and bad. So at around 18, 19, I really decided that I wanted to be an actor. I hadn't locked in on writing as a career possibility, but I definitely knew I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to perform. I wanted to tell stories that way. And that was one of the things that helped me not go down some of those other more negative paths because A, it wasn't a part of who I am. B, I wanted to pursue something that would give me a greater high. And C, not necessarily in this order, I didn't want to shame my mom. So the arts can be very powerful, even when you're not sure what the hell you're doing.
People ask, well, how do I know that it's for me?
Mm.
Right. And there was a speaker one of these days, maybe episode 498. I'll remember who said it. But he
Hey,
says,
well, you
well,
just
look,
remembered who inspired the index cards
right. So
on a
stay
previous
tuned,
episode.
ladies and gentlemen. It can come at any time. But the person said, he was asked, how do you know if you're a writer? He says, well, if you can avoid writing, if you can do anything other than writing, construction, brain surgery, whatever, if you can do anything other than writing, do that. But if you can't not write, you're a writer.
Mm.
And that applies all across the arts. If there's something that pulls you in to some form of art, if you see a movie and you say, I want to do that, or, you become a theater kid and continue that all the way, then that's what you are. If denial won't work, then you have to deal. So let's talk about what that deal is.
Mm.
It is not, and I'm saying this with all love in my heart, everybody, it is not usually monetarily reward. The number of creatives out there versus the number of creative millionaires would really keep you up at night. However, the good news is that doesn't matter. Because I noticed what I just said about if you can avoid writing, then if you can do anything else instead of writing, do that, right? But if you can't, then you have to write. Notice how it didn't say you have to write for a certain amount of money. You can make some money. And the thing that I would suggest is if you're pursuing writing, there's plenty of sources to help you with your technique, but also search out sources to help educate yourself on the business side.
Mm.
And one of the things that you should embrace very early on is that rejection is part of it, but it's not the end game. Creativity, being in the arts, is a life of attrition. If you keep at it, something is going to happen. Most of the time, it's not enormous wealth, but it will be, oh, this hit this publisher at just the right time, and she or they or he wants to publish it. And that's a really good experience.
Yeah.
Or occasionally, your co-host of a podcast will contact you and say, I had to share this video with you. Okay, what is it? Maybe it's something that we'll work on as a story. That no, it's just a fan that he met at a con who really, really loved, for some reason, one of your stories. And you get to have that experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Alex often tells the story about the father and daughter team who both loved blackjack, and the experience of having someone say that to you. Amazing. Go out, both to feed your art, go out and be of the world with people. It doesn't matter who they are, friends, whatever. Go to conventions, go to lectures, consume art if you can afford it, and spend some money on it. If you can't, there's libraries still.
Yeah, I'm still right. Yeah.
As of this viewing here, there's
Yeah.
still libraries. And if there aren't, I'm sorry, you've watched this just a little dangerously into the future. Um, but there's always a way to find some art to consume. There are how-tos on every style, every art out there. Educate yourself and then try. And when you're trying, don't worry so much about those rules. Some people say, well, you have to adhere to the expectations of a genre. Probably, yeah.
Then
But
again,
that doesn't mean you have to be cookie cutter.
yeah.
This is not robotics. As cool as some dance routine might be, the best of them throw in a little bit of themselves. Same thing here. You can follow genre tropes. You can do something with them. Sure. There's books you can find to learn all those tropes and all those genres, and then you see what you as a person can add to that discussion,
It
because
becomes
art
it
is a
becomes
discussion.
it becomes less classic and more jazz in certain times.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
You mentioned dance in particular, and I flashed on, and this may be a name that some of the folks out there will know, and maybe not. Gregory Hines.
sure.
Yeah, he was a dancer, and in particular specialty of tap, but he would just create routines within a choreographed piece, or he would be inspired by music he heard or a particular person in the audience that he revered or respected, and he would take those emotions and begin to work it into the dance steps and start to just express his feelings through his feet.
Yeah,
And but he had to learn to dance first. He had to
yeah.
learn the basics first so that he could then expand on that through pure inspiration and talent.
So I believe it's Herbie Hancock. You mentioned
Hmm.
jazz. I believe it's Herbie Hancock who tells this story. But for our purposes, it says a lot about how to move forward in your art, right? So he says he was playing with Miles Davis and he was playing the song and he made a mistake. And he was that's how he experienced it. Miles took a second or three and then played something that worked the mistake into the piece.
Hmm.
What Herbie said was Miles was so open to the moment that he didn't hear it as a mistake. He heard it as an opportunity
Hmm.
and then created from that.
Hmm.
So that's not a bad thought to keep way in the back of your mind or somewhere in the corner of your soul when you're creating. Now, that doesn't mean you can ignore everything. Well, that means if you have the basics and you go on a little riff, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's good enough for Miles.
Yeah.
It'll be
It's
good
good
enough
enough
for
for
your
me.
story or your
Yeah.
poem or your piece of art,
Yeah.
right? So learn the fundamentals, and there's plenty of sources everywhere. There's like 400 and some odd episodes that you can learn some fundamentals right here for free. We
That's
don't
right.
we don't charge a penny.
Yeah.
But also there's books, there's YouTube is a great source. You can find this open classroom. You can go and look for writing classes and just sit and watch and listen and take notes and learn. There's so much opportunity out there.
Let
Learn
me,
and then add yourself into the process.
right. Let me riff off of something that you said a little while ago as we sort
You
of,
go, Miles.
yeah, as okay, as we bring this sort of around to towards conclusion. You said earlier, and this is very much a point about don't look to go into this creative experience or this passion expecting to become a millionaire or whatever. Yeah, we've had on the show numerous
Millionaires.
truly,
No, no.
yeah, yeah, truly talented people,
Sure.
truly talented people who have written books or books after books or stories after stories after stories and have an audience, right? So it's not like they're writing just for themselves. There are people who look for their work and buy their work and all that, but they also have a job. They have, or an actual, in a couple of cases, they have careers that they've worked at for some time, but this is their passion. This is their love. And the thing that I wanted to say about that is you need to take care of yourself. You need
Mhm.
to create a space in which you know that you're comfortable. You know, you got a meal, you've got a roof over your head, you got some clothes on your back, and you can make that time, that space to write. Now, again, people do this at different stages. There are people who live in a room in a shared apartment and they're eating ramen noodles and writing everything on spiral notebooks. There's that. There's the other level of people who have a 9 to 5 job and who get up and children and who get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to put in their creative time before they have to deal with the family stuff before they have to go to the job. So
Mhm.
there's all kinds of different levels in which people will take care of what they need to take care of so that they can have the time or make the time to pay attention to their creative needs and their creative wants and desires. And I can honestly say, speaking for myself, at this ripe, mature, snow on the roof in the chin age that I'm in, that I am not sitting on a pile of money anywhere. It's just none of that. There's no situation that's, my financial needs and worries are taken care of now. It's not that. But when I look back at all of the challenges that I've gone through and all of the really difficult times, I also have to look at all of the exceptional, wonderful things that I've had the opportunity to experience. And I realize that 90% of those things happened because I followed my passion, because I did become an actor and I worked at it. And at a point when I transitioned from acting to writing, It was because I wanted to tell more stories in that form or that genre than I did in the other. But I didn't let go of the desire to tell stories, to be a part of it. And at a certain point, when I was also writing, but I also started to teach, that was again to do what others had done for me. There were people who took me by the hand and said, "You want to do this? Here, let me show you this. Let me show you that. Let me make this a little easier for you." Blah blah blah. So my turning around and doing the same made perfect sense to me. And I
Right.
love it when my students get it, when they suddenly realize, oh, this idea that I had, I've been working on it, and I took your advice, and I did, and I get it now. I see it. That's such a high. That is such a glorious high. And I know Chris has experienced teaching younger people at some point, and then watching them pursue their dream and to reach certain plateaus. Again, nobody's got the mansions yet. When they do, they're going to call and let us know. We can move in or we can come visit. But at this point, they are also out there fulfilling their dreams because it's who they are, it's something that they want, and they're taking care of themselves or their families while they are on that trajectory.
Well,
So, A, discipline. Give yourself time. Make time for you to pursue your art. Whether it's a half hour every day or 2 hours a day, do that. For everybody who's ever taken a job as a barista or an office worker, while so they can go home and hit the keyboards or do the choreography in the back room or whatever, do that because that's what you need to do. And if you're hoping to make 2 million, 10 million, 15, 20 million dollars in the next year and a half, and you read about Jim Carrey's $10 million check, and you read about some of these other people who made that, that's great, that's wonderful. Put that on the wall next to the 30 million other people who didn't get to do that, but who also pursued their dreams responsibly or enthusiastically because it's part of who they are. And I think that's really what you want to look at the end of the day. Can you look back on your pursuits and go, yeah, I remain true to that. I remain true to who I am or what I wanted. I went for that and I feel fulfilled in that respect. Fine, do that. If you're going to do it professionally, then add that factor in, like Chris was saying. Do your homework, get your practice in, make business decisions alongside of the artistic ones.
And the sooner you learn that stuff, I think the better, more well-rounded you'll be. I had a day job. So I've had jobs since I was 10. Throughout my adolescence, I had two jobs probably most of the time. It's because my family, too many mouths, not enough money. So you had to make your own. If you wanted to buy an album or buy comic books, you had to make your own cash. There
Hmm.
was no allowance in my house. But you can find time to write anywhere all the time. I did 30 years as a classroom teacher. You can't stop in the middle of class and say, hey, I'm going to write a chapter. No, but you can have an index cards. And if an idea was really persistent, I'd say, make a point of that. That's a good point. Let me make it. And then I'd write my own note. Excellent. Can you expand? And we'd get back on it. You could do those little things. Or between classes when I was in the hallway saying, keep going, pull your pants up, out of here, get your finger out of your nose, whatever it was. I, I'd be writing. People like, oh, you write my name down? I was writing something about Mallory and Gunner, but
Yep.
perhaps I am.
Keep them guessing.
Reflect on your lifestyle, young man. You find, and we had talked a million times on this show about how when my wife was kind enough to provide twins, I had to adjust when I could write because I used to write in the afternoons or in the evenings, but I had to write before anyone else was up. And I mean, I wrote my first two novels that way, and it's doable. That's all. I'm not a hero. No parade for me, but you can do it. That's the message for
Good
you.
title. Good title. No parade for me. Yeah, I
No
like
parade for me. That's my memoir. There you
that.
go. It'd be a good 8 to 9 pages long.
Yeah. A Hemingway moment. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. So anyway, we wanted to take this time, and again, those of you who follow the show know that we can have casual conversations, we can have in-depth conversations, but it's usually conversational, and we
Right.
wanted to make sure that, we address some of these things. Give you food for thought. Food for
Yeah.
thought.
Well, we wanted to have a calmer, more welcoming tone with this one because the idea is that, there's a lot of tension in the world today. So someone should be saying, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds political.
Too darn bad. Or
Yes, you
damn
can
bad.
write. There you go. Yes, you can write. Yes, you can
Yes.
draw. Yes, you can
Yes.
just you
Yeah.
trust what's inside and then
And
see.
and and express what's inside,
Yeah.
you know, because that's who you are. It's a part of who you are.
All right. Maybe we should ask people to write in the comments, the reasons they might have for why they can't write or they can't
Okay.
do this. And we'll
Let's
do a
let's
whole episode addressing those concerns.
Okay, so people, as Chris just said, maybe we should ask.
We're going to ask you,
Yeah.
what gets in the way of your writing?
Yeah.
And then we're going to be the Pepto-Bismol or perhaps the X-Lax of that problem.
Oh, yeah, folks.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you waited the whole episode to see what would come out at the end,
Oh, geez.
see, now that is what you call something that needs a rewrite.
Yeah.
And
I'll
maybe
be
some
editing that
editing.
out. No, I won't.
See?
I'm gonna
So
leave that right in there. I'm gonna let him live with that one. Folks, no, really, again, please.
sometimes you
please,
have to flush a draft and start all over.
I'm gonna hurt you. We're only a half hour away from each other, fellas.
Listen. Just take care of the paperwork, open a window, start again. You'll be fine.
And on that note, please remember that while you're doing that, to tell your own damn story.
Yes, that's true.
Take care, everybody.
Peace. Enjoy.
Sick man. The sick man. Oh, God.